Today we're building this birdhouse out of two $3 fence pickets. All right, so to start, we're just going to take regular 5.5-inch wide fence picket. I'm going to start by cutting the front and the back plate, and we're going to go at 11 inches. Okay, real simple. We'll just start there. We work everything kind of around it. So now that we've got that, what we need to do is we need to make a point in the top, okay? And I know this angle, and angles can be really tricky. I know this top angle to be 45 degrees. That kind of gives you more of that steeper A-frame looking sort of pitch. So this board is just under 5.5 inches wide. So right at about 2 5/8 should be the center. From here, we're going to go over to our miter saw. So now on your miter saw, since we're looking for a 45-degree angle, we need to split that in half. So essentially we need 22.5 degrees cut one way and 22.5 degrees the other. So what you're going to want to do is take your miter saw, and there should be like an auto stop. It should click into place 22.5 degrees, okay? Half of 45 is we're going to line up both of the boards together, okay, right into the middle. And we're going to line this up, right? It's a little tricky to line up. We're going to line that up to cut right down the middle there. And you want to put pressure on the board down, not forward, okay? So you don't get anything jumping on you. All right, and then all we're going to do is going to flip this over. And there you have it. You should have a piece with the straight sides roughly 4.5 inches to where it starts to slope in. So from the bottom, have 4.5 inches, then the slope begins, okay? That's how you know your cuts are roughly straight from the chop saw. Okay, so now we're gonna do the sidewall. So we got 4.5 inches tall, and what we wanna do is make it just 3 inches deep. So you're gonna need two 4.5-inch by 3-inch pieces. There we have it. We got the side pieces, and now for the bottom, we're going to want one basically 5 3/4 inches long by just the normal width. So if it's 5.5-inch wide picket, that's perfect. We just want to keep the same width as this board. So 5 3/4 inches. All right, and then what I like to do on this bottom plate is actually to take the corners off of it. Just adds a nice little look to it. So you can set your saw to a 45-degree angle and measure in about 1 inch off the side. And that'll help you just take out the corners just a little bit here. Just like that. Okay, so now starting on the roof pitch, there's going to be 3 different levels to this roof here, okay? And since we're going for a 45-degree angle, I'm going to show you the easiest way to do this, so that way you don't have to have 2 pieces that join right at the very, very tip here. We're basically going to overlap them, right? So what I want you to do, set your miter saw to 45 degrees and make one first cut on the board that you're using here as a starting point, okay? Just right near the end, just take off 1/2 inch. Okay, now from there, you've got on your board a 45-degree angle right here. Now on the top, I want you to measure out 9 inches, okay? And then I want you to make that cut, and I want it to go like that. So that way, both sides of the board are tapered in to the same direction, okay? All right. There you have it. This board should be about 9 inches in length. Okay. Now, you're going to take that same angled cut there, and you're going to measure this one about 8 inches. Okay. Same from the top of the cut board, right? The top longer end. I'm going to go in 8 inches. Okay. And then I'm going to make that cut, and it's going to be the same exact thing as the last one, where it's going to taper in to each other. So that's going to be my cut. that's going to be my cut. So there you go. There's your second board. You got 9 inches, you got 8 inches. So we've got what's going to be our peak, right? And then we've got one board that's going to line up here, roughly, right? And then we got the other board that's going to line up here, okay? Actually, yep, just like that, okay? So this way, you don't have to have this really iffy joint at the very top. It's going to sit basically like that. They're going to overlap from each other. Now, on this second set of roof, you're going to do the same thing, right? I got tapered edge, except you're going to do 12 and 11 for the measurements. And I'm going to cut it again, tapered both in to the same direction. There's my board at 12. Same direction. And I'll mark one at 11. There you have it. There's an 11, and we're going to do the same thing, which is why we cut one of them shorter than the other, is so that way you make up for how they overlap, and this is going to be the second level. Now on this second level, we're actually going to make it a little bit narrower. It's just for looks. And to be real, you don't have to do this second or third layer on the roof. It's just kind of for aesthetics, right? Just kind of make it look a little bit fancier. But for these, we're going to actually make them 4 inches wide. So I'm going to head over to my bandsaw and make short work of this. There you go. Now they're about 4 inches wide again. The exact measurements don't matter, just for aesthetics. We want it narrower than the first level of roof. Stick with me. We're about to start putting it together. And because 2 layers isn't enough, and who doesn't want a third layer of their roof, we're going to do one more set of cuts with those same angles of 45 degrees at 6 inches and 5 inches, okay? So 6 inches. So now this third level, we're going to want to be even narrower for a cooler look. So I'm going to rip these down in half about, I don't know, 2.5 inches. All right, now we have one more piece to cut out before we start getting to the more fun part. And so what I want you to do here is we're going to create basically a decorative front where the hole would be. This is just an additional layer to it, adds a lot of depth to the birdhouse. Again, you don't have to do this. Makes it look a little fancier and more fun. So you're going to cut it out. You're going to do a 9-inch, actually you're going to do 8 3/4 tall by 3 inches wide. Okay, we're going to start there. And then again, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to make that 45-degree angle at the top to match the rest of the birdhouse front. So again, get over, set up your miter saw for 22.5 degrees, and then we're going to cut one side, and we're going to cut the other. So for this one, what you might want to do, just to be safe, is to measure from the bottom to where your angle starts. And see, we've got just about 4 inches there. Let's see, just about 4 inches to where the angle starts. Okay. And then mark that on the other side, and then work that to line up your miter saw. So now I've got the midpoint lined up. There you go. Okay, so there's what should be our last final cutout piece. This is going to go on the very front just to kind of add that added depth to it. Now, at this point in the build, right, we have our front and backs. Ta-da! We have our bottom piece. Ta-da! We have our sides. We have our first layer of roofs, which should be 2 different sizes. Then we've got our second layer, tall and narrow. Then we've got third layer, little minis. Okay? And then we got a little front decorative piece there. Okay. So at this point in the build, this is when I like to do one level of sanding on all of the pieces. This will make your life drastically easier once it's put together. Yeah, we're going to sand it again once it's all together, but if you do sanding now, it's going to get in all the little nooks and crannies that just become a nightmare to get to, or impossible to get to once it's all put together. And for sanding, I really just like my handheld DeWalt orbital sander. It makes quick work of all of these pieces. And yeah, I generally do 80 grit or 120 grit for cedar. It sands down pretty easily, and even with 80 grit, it makes it really smooth. So take yourself a few minutes, sand down every single piece, front, just a little bit on the sides, and on the back side. Don't worry about rounding edges at this point or anything. We'll do that once it's all on. It'll kind of pull it all together and make it really nice. So here's all of our pieces laid out for you. So now, before getting to popping this all together, there's one more thing we have to do now that will make your life drastically easier. And you can do this one of two ways. The simple way is just to make the clean out the bottom of it, right? So you have a couple of screws down there, unscrew it for yourself. I like to make these fancy little doors. It adds a level of complexity to it, but I get a lot of compliments on them, so I figured I'd show you exactly how I do it. So essentially what I'm going to do is you've got the front and back pieces here, okay? I want to try to locate which one I'm going to have to be the front, maybe the nicest looking one. Either of these are actually pretty fine. Okay, so now on the back, what I'm going to want to do is basically cut out a door here, okay? That's about 3/4 inches from either edge and about 3 inches up, okay? So that is going to be my cutout. Now, the hinges are going to go on this side, okay? So this is going to be your hinge side, right? And then the other side is going to be where I have a clasp. So, something that I learned, because when you make a door like this, you need it to be able to open and close properly. So this side, where the hinge is going to go, you actually need to taper this cut in, and the best tool to do that with is the bandsaw. Okay, that should be about right. We'll make that cut. Alright, then we're going to go flat again. There you go. Now you have the two cuts. Now we got to make this top cut, and that's where I do like my scroll saw. And there you go. You got your door cut out. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to sand the edges of this just to make it a little bit easier for the install. All right, now we're really ready to assemble. Okay, so what we're going to start with is we're actually going to start with the front. No hole on it yet. We got to wait for that. And the back, and then we're going to attach the sides. Okay, so again, make sure that you've got your pieces lined up perfectly, because one side will be a little bit off if they're, just set up the wrong way, just because the cuts aren't going to be 100% perfect. So we're going to take the front and the back, and we're going to get the sides in. Now the sides should line up with basically the top of where it starts to curve, right, where that angle starts, right there, on both sides. I'm just going to glue one, pop a few brad nails in, go on to the next. I always see everybody using clamps and all these fancy tools to line things up. I don't know, maybe it's because I have a construction background and I'm pretty confident with holding things while shooting nails in them. But I'm pretty good without buying some $50 90-degree clamp to hold it into place. Let's get the back side on, make sure it goes on the right way, so that way your door tapers the correct way. And what you're going to find, right, and I don't think people talk about this enough, especially with cedar, is like, okay, for example, this is not lining up. Be real, it ain't lining up even close. It's like a quarter of an inch off. But that's because the wood bows a lot, and I mean, we're not planing this stuff and shooting for perfect. If there's one thing I learned in construction, it's that just about any board can be manipulated into getting it to do what you want it to do. So sometimes you're just going to have to kind of force it into place, pop a nail into there, and boom, be done with it. And then kind of adjust the top piece because that's not fully lined up either. So kind of got to bend that into place, right? This stuff can be bent and worked a little bit. Don't be afraid. You're going to figure out how to work with your medium, right, over time. And sometimes little mistakes happen. Like I just had this brad nail chip off a little tiny piece there, and that sucks. But I have the piece, and I'm just going to put a little glue in there, shove it back into place, dang it. And then, once that's dry, I'm going to sand it all down. You won't even know it was there. So there you have it. You have your front attached to your sides, back with the door opening. Just leave it like that for now. Then I'm going to go ahead and pop on the bottom. So with this, how this lines up is, remember how we tapered off the two front 45 degrees? You're basically going to set it up aligning with the back. So you got this little porch, step, stoop type of thing. All right, so line that up. Sure that's good. Set that down. Pop a few brad nails in. All right, there you go. Now you have the bottom on. Now we're going to start working with the roof here. Okay, so we are going to go with the widest version, the first ones we cut at 8 and 9 inches. Okay, now this you're going to want to check it out first, right? Don't go just slapping it up just yet. You want to make sure that it lines up well, just in case you made your cuts a little short. Not that I've ever done that. And you shouldn't either. But in the event you did, and they don't line up, let's say, with the bottom of where it starts to curve in, maybe you got to go back and do another cut on them, okay? But in this case, we line up pretty darn well. So I'm going to line up one of these. Right, and this takes a little finagling, right? So what I'm actually going to do is the shorter one, I'm going to line up to be in line, right, with the angle of the roof. Now these overlap a little bit, right? So what we need to do is we kind of need to put some marks here to kind of keep it even from front and back. So the looks of it, our board is 5.5 inches wide. Our house is 4 inches wide, so that's 1.5 inches, so 3/4 of an inch. So mark 3/4 of an inch, just a little mark on the inside here, on each side. And then these are going to be where we line up the inside of this too. Okay? So we're going to line that up. So I'm going to glue down the peak here on each side. Alright, looks pretty darn good to me. Good enough for rock and roll or birdhouses. Just gonna pop in a couple of nails. There we go. Do the same thing on the bottom. And bam. Alright. Now I'm going to line this up. Remember, always dry fit this stuff first, folks. Make sure it looks good to make sure you don't have to go in and make another cut. That lines up pretty darn good. So I'm going to glue this. Now if you're ever wondering where you should pop your nails in, always verge towards the inside, okay? Don't try to push it too far to the outside to get it perfect, because when you have a blowout towards the outside, it really kind of sucks. And it, you got some work to fix it or redo it. So just verge inwards a little bit. Okay, so lining up the second layer of the roof here. We're going to start with the short board here, and again, this board is 4 inches wide. This roof is 5.5 inches wide, so that's 1.5 inches. We want to make marks on both sides of 3/4 of an inch, so that way this can be centered. And what I'm going to do with this one is going to line up to be right in line, because my other board, this is the longer one, is going to overlap the other way, okay? So we're going to kind of stagger how these joints sit, all right? So again, I've got 3/4 of an inch marked from the outside edges, so I know where to line up at the top and at the bottom here. I'm going to hit it with a little glue. 4 of them should be fine, but keep them evenly spaced, so that way if you do see them, they do end up looking nice. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side here. Actually, I'm just going to mark 3/4 from the bottom edge, because the top has its marks. Voila! All right, now you have 2 levels to your roof. And now for the third one. Again, you can stop here if you want and just finish it off, or you can be a little over ambitious, and then boom, we're going to line up the top 3, or the top 2. So this board is 2.5 inches wide. The other one is 4 inches wide, so it's 1.5 inches. So I'm going to mark in 3/4 of an inch on both sides of the top board, so we can line up. And we're going to line up the short board first to line up with the peak. Glue it. Viola. There you go. All right. We're not quite done yet. So, remember that front little decorative piece there? That guy is going to go on like this. Okay? So, I'm going to mark my center of both of the boards here as best I can. So that's 3 inches, so 1.5 inches there. Bottom of this, 5.5, so 2 3/4 about. I'll mark it there. And then I'm going to mark it somewhere up here, around 2 3/4. Alright. Now, what I am going to say, I just marked this, and if you look at it closely and you got ADD a little bit, you're going to notice it's not quite centered. So this is where, yes, you got to eyeball it a little bit. Make it look good. Make it line up with that peak in the very middle. Trust me, if you're 1/8 of an inch left or right on that, the way you see it is going to be better than what your measurement says on it. Trust me. Okay, so from here then, I'm just going to glue the back of it. I'm going to place that so that it looks centered. And then I'll pop a few nails in. Alright, there we go. Now, before we go putting the back door on, okay, we need to make a hole for the birds. Now, for this, this was really designed for 1.25 inch hole size, which is good for most chickadees and sparrows, things like that. So what I'm going to do for this to line up my hole, this angle here hits at 4 inches off the base, and that's roughly the height of the hole you need for lots of birds in this area. So I'm going to line it up with these 2 angles, not the angles for the actual birdhouse, which are about 1/2 inch higher. That's what's also going to make it look right at the end of the day. Okay, so 4 inches off the bottom, I'm going to make a mark. Right, that's going to be my vertical placement of the hole, and then left to right, because this board is 3 inches wide, at 1.5 inches, boom. That's going to be my mark, and that's going to be where my hole goes. There we go. And there's your hole. Okay, so now, on back to the door. Yeah, remember your piece of door? Don't throw it out. Don't think it's scrap. That has been known to happen. So now, what we're going to do, get out some hinges. We got a couple things here. We got these little hinges, right? Just like $1 each. Amazon. And then we got this little clasp set up here. Okay. It just hooks into the other part here. They're a little fancy looking. You can use whatever the heck you want. The screws are tiny, and the screws strip out pretty easily into the wood. So you got to be patient with it and take your time. So the way that I do this is I take the hinge out of the door, right? Make sure you're not doing the tapered side, right? Not the tapered side. That's where your clasp goes. For the hinge side, you want to use the flat side. And I just line it up roughly 1/2 inch off the top or so, and fold it over so that way it makes a clean 90-degree angle. And then I do always pre-drill these. So take my drill, drill in there. And you do need a pretty fine screw head to work with these tiny screws. Be very careful. You do these by hand at first until you realize how sensitive the wood can actually be to these size screws. And I just eyeball these, folks. I don't sit there and measure them. I think that would be a nightmare. 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. This is just so you don't screw up. Then we're gonna want to line these up with the door here, okay? And this part's a little bit tricky, and you want to try to align it so that way the door can still open, right? Just as straight as you can. What I like to do is get one screw in here, and then that helps hold it, and then I line it up. Probably need a screwdriver or something, to push that door out potentially from the front bird hole there, actually, which helps a lot. Now for this part, again, a little bit tricky here. We have to line this up through the door. So what I would say is take a screwdriver, go through the front hole where the birds go, and use that to kind of keep it in place for you. First time you work with these clasps, you are going to screw them up. There we go. At the end of the day, with this little door, clasps shut. All that work for a little door, but it kind of looks nice, right? There you go. You clean it out once a year. Yay! Clean nest. Boom. Lock it. Reveal's pretty solid on this one. Not too much of a gap all around, but enough to still, if water gets in here, it can still leak out and stuff like that. You now have your birdhouse. All right, so on this extra credit part, this part's a little bit tricky. So what you want to do on the copper, right, is you want to make a 3.5 inch by 2.5 inch box, okay? Then you want to mark the center points for each of those so you have a diamond, okay? Then we're going to cut this out. We're going to round the edges, and we're going to make a hole in the middle, but we're going to start with the hole in the middle first so you've actually got something to clamp onto, okay? Okay, and then the second clamp on the other side. Now, you should have the center marked here. Okay, and this part you're gonna want to take slow at first, okay? And then once it does start to cut, you're gonna want to continue to go with a fast drill speed, but with not a whole lot of pressure. You don't want to create too many burrs on the edges here, okay? So I'm going to place it, punch that in so it doesn't move. Okay, so now I'm going to go with a faster drill speed, but real light pressure, okay? We're just going to rotate a little bit. Cut through on all sides. Okay, There we go. So now, I did create some burrs on there. We're going to take care of that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is I am going to cut out the outside edges of this. Okay. Just along those patterns. I use big old tin snips. Sure, you could probably do this with, you know, a scroll saw. Now this gauge copper is not very thick. I've used several different thicknesses. I think this is 18 gauge. I also have like 16 or 14 gauge. That starts to get a little trickier to work with. Not so easy to cut. But this thinner stuff, I mean, this flexes pretty darn easily here. This is just here so that way the squirrels don't chew a big hole into the front of it. Okay, so I'm just going to cut this out. I'm going to stick with the diamond pattern at first. Cut it out carefully, slowly, meticulously. There we go. There's your diamond. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take these little edges and I'm just going to trim ever so slightly. Now from here, to fix those burrs on the edge, because you can see it's just not a clean cut, I'm actually going to use a Dremel. Okay, just with a sanding bit on there, and I'm going to clean up all the edges and I'm going to clean up the outsides too, just kind of make everything that much nicer. And yes, for this part, I do wear gloves. You know, the metal can heat up quite a bit. You got sharp edges you're dealing with in case the Dremel slips. Like, you know, I'm just using a regular sanded, you know, 60 grit, I think, 120 grit sanding wheel on this. There you go. It's going to be hard to tell, but all these edges are just cleaned up a little bit, so they're no longer sharp. And I'm going to pop that right onto the front with some nails here. Now, what I like to use are brass nails, just little tiny 1-inch brass nails, and they just, you know, complement the copper in a really nice way. And I just eyeball this to line up. Now you got to make sure with these nails, you got to commit with these things, okay? Because once you got a hole in that copper, there ain't no going back. All right. There we go. Da-da-da. And you can put copper flares on the roof, and I've seen all sorts of stuff done. Copper is a little tricky to work with. It'll take you some time. I'm still figuring it out. So now, just gonna fill in all the little nail holes. Give it a quick sand. We're gonna rough down the edges, and it looks okay right now. But wait until you put this final sand on it and you round out the edges a little bit. Man, it adds a whole nother level to it. It makes the work look that much more professional. So let's fill in the holes, give it a final sand. There we go. All the holes kind of filled in, and now we're going to give it a sand. Now when you sand it, right, you're going to want to curve kind of all these edges all around it just a little bit, and you're going to see how much better it looks after you've done that. Alright, that round of sanding is done. You can just see it just rounds off the edges a bit, you know, just makes it just a little bit more polished and put together. I round the edges just a touch under here. Same thing with the peaks up here. And the last thing we've got to do is put some linseed oil on it and put the hooks up, and we got ourselves a birdhouse. Now with cedar, you don't have to do anything to this, folks. You don't have to stain it. You don't have to put a sealer on it like polyurethane or anything like that, because cedar is naturally insect repellent, mold repellent, and so you can just leave it as is and let it weather and, you know, do what it's going to do. Been all linseed oiled. It's looking pretty. We got the copper flare on there / squirrel protector. But now we gotta hang it. Last step, I promise. What I do is I have these little eye hooks. Okay, you can use whatever you want. These are just, whatever, 1/2 inch holes there. And I'm gonna drill a couple holes in at this second level. Okay, just right in there. A little tricky, right? But it's not very heavy, so you don't need something, structurally sound. Push in a little bit. In the front, do the same thing in the back, kind of right in the peak. So you got to kind of push your drill in to start it before getting that hole to go. All right, there we go. Yeah, I'm literally at the final stages. So now I'm just taking this little chain, these 2 little clamps, and attaching them to the eye hooks. So there you go. It's all wrapped up, ladies and gentlemen. Copper, door, oiled, nail holes filled, everything. Probably took me a couple hours, but if you want one that's done just a little bit quicker, I put together this video. Go ahead, watch it. I'll take you step by step on how to build another amazing birdhouse.